I think what makes Alexander McQueen unique is that you can see, even if you don't really like fashion, you can see the genius and the artistry. You can spot an artist a mile away.
He was hugely talented. He seemed to be able to cut clothes. It was almost a second nature. It wasn't really difficult for him. It seemed very easy. I've never really experienced that before.
My uncle was born Lee McQueen, but obviously known to the world as Alexander McQueen, a fashion designer. Lee grew up in Stratford. Me and my brother used to play around the flats where he used to sit and watch the birds. And I used to spend a lot of time watching him draw, and Lee was into all that kind of rave scene, and that was kind of his life back then.
What's very interesting about Alexander McQueen is that he didn't take the normal route into being a fashion designer. He left school at 16 and studied for 4 years on Savile Row, learning the tools of the tailoring trade. He then worked briefly for the theatrical costumiers, Bermans and Nathans, and then went on to have work experience with Koji Tatsuno in London and Romeo Gigli in Milan. At this point, he joined the Central St Martin's MA course, and it was here he made the transition from being a tailor and cutter to being a fashion designer.
I guess he knew from an early age that he wanted to be a fashion designer. You know, from what I've heard from the age of 3, you know, stories of him drawing dresses underneath the wallpaper in Stratford at Bickerstaff Road, where he grew up.
McQueen was totally confident in the way he used scissors. He would cut directly onto the model. He would create entire garments from start to finish on his own. So his staff would go home and they'd come back in the morning and find a beautifully cut frock coat on the stand.
Wearing McQueen, I think, is quite empowering. You feel really like a powerful woman.
He wasn't curtailed by just using textile or fabric for clothing. He used shells, leather, glass, metal, working with a whole team of creative collaborators. And the other thing that makes him stand out totally was the drama and the spectacular nature of his catwalk collections. He was inspired by performance art, by film, by the Gothic, by Victorian dress, and he brought all these influences together to create something totally new.
I started modelling at the age of 15, and about 6 months later did my first ever fashion show, which was actually for Prada. About a week later, got a phone call saying, oh, you've got another show in London, and that was a very, very brand new designer called Alexander McQueen. I think it was his first show after graduating from Fashion Week, and there were no fittings, there was nothing, there was no, no sort of big organisation. It was just turn up at the venue, which was a sort of big old warehouse, and a lot of people sort of running around being quite crazy. I think they sellotaped shoes onto our feet. We just had the base of a shoe, and then the rest was sellotaped on. And I didn't really know what I was doing, and I think everyone there was learning on their feet. So I just thought that was normal at the time. People genuinely would queue for hours to try and get into a McQueen show, like they don't do anymore. He was working with a obviously brilliant Katie England, and I think the partnership between them was one of those weird alchemy moments where it just drew in, and the crowd that they hung out with, all the people that they sort of surrounded themselves with, that all made for this magical time.
My first experience with a designer was with Alexander McQueen, and he asked me to style his show, and it was the first show I'd ever styled, so it was a really new experience. I hadn't even done it as an assistant or a junior. He just said, oh, come and style my show. So together we just worked it out because he wasn't so experienced at it either. There was always something that was extreme, you know, whether we were trying to create snow or the girls to walk on water or there was a fire. It was never just about the presentation of clothes on a runway. There was always some other effect.
I wore the birds in the, what I call the Insane Asylum show. I'm sure that's not the name, but that was quite an extraordinary show because usually, especially with the McQueen show, you really feed off the lights, you feed off the music and the audience. And this was a very strange show to be a part of because you essentially just went into a very bright white room and all you could see was yourself. So it was quite, it played on everyone's minds, that show. I think the audience for a long time could only see themselves before the show started. And then they could see in and we couldn't see out. So it really was, you know, you felt quite insane. And I was wearing the birds, so I had three, you know, it was the Hitchcock moment.
As we, the audience, were waiting for the show to begin, we were confronted with a reflection of ourselves, which was very discomforting. As the show began, the models came into the box, but the mirror effect was reversed. They could not see out. They could only see their own reflections. It was a parable about fashion.
I remember Kate Moss and Lee standing together just before I went on going, "Go on, Jay, go on," which I think just wound me up even more. You know, so I sort of go out and I am sort of slightly freaking out. And I genuinely am quite freaking out at this point because I'm so sort of nervous and overexcited. And you've got to be up for the challenge, which is why I think he kind of chose those models at that time when he was doing those huge shows that could just take a little bit of direction like that and do something with it.
He used to come to the V&A archives regularly, and it was very lovely being able to show him some of our 19th century tailoring, for example. He was very knowledgeable about tailoring and he understood immediately the cut or the way a garment would work. And he also knew his fashion history. We also staged 2 fashion in motions with him, one in 1999 and one in 2001 with Sean Lean. What was lovely about working on Fashion in Motion with him was that he understood immediately what it was all about, which is bringing live fashion to the corridors and galleries of the museum.
Me and Lee worked together for so many years. We kind of really understood each other and really understood the kind of direction of, I understood the direction of what he would like and how he wanted it executed. So when we did meet to design pieces or to come up with concepts, it was very organic and it was very fluid and it was very simple. I was a trained goldsmith and that's one of the reasons Lee loved working with me, because he knew of my skill and my attention to detail. But I think where Lee took me was quite interesting because I was a jeweller, but then I was almost becoming a tailor. I was pattern cutting in metal, which is something I had never ever done before.
Now seems like a very good moment to look back on McQueen's achievements. What he's left behind is the most wonderful legacy.
Every piece, it's kind of like a moment in time in Lee's life. Each piece is like demonstrating Lee's dreams and nightmares. It really is a look into Lee's soul. What made Lee unique as an artist? I think it is his ability to clearly see an idea and know how to translate that to people. Even if people didn't get it, it still resonated probably within them.
I think he had to work through his emotions and he was very open, so he wasn't afraid to just let everything out in terms of creating something, or there was no pretense with it, and he wasn't doing anything for a special effect. He was doing it because it was true to him without really considering the consequences.